Last week on Dynamite, the icon Sting announced that at next year's Revolution pay-per-view, whether that take place in February or March of 2024, well, that was going to be his last appearance as an in-ring competitor for All Elite Wrestling, 3 years after he made his debut at Revolution in 2021. And the question I'm going to start asking as of right now, even though we're 4 or 5, 6 months away from that pay-per-view itself, even though we have no idea what kind of rivalries, what kind of feuds he might get himself into in the long run down that road as soon as we get into the new year, I have a few options in terms of who might be his final opponent. And of course, I've got about 3 options. Got a very obvious one, a dark horse one that I would love for it to happen, and then we got the third option, which isn't the most viable. It wouldn't be the most attractive for AEW to pull off. But again, I firmly believe Tony Khan has given Sting free range as far as who his final opponent will be. And therefore, if Sting decides it to be one of his former rivals, which there are many on the current AEW roster, then so be it. And you already know my thoughts on wrestlers still being active well past their prime, and Sting is damn well past his prime at this point. He was damn well past his prime in 2014 when he left TNA Wrestling, but I digress. So here is option number 1, and I gotta go with the most obvious option, and I have a feeling you already know who I'm talking about. Of course, I'm talking about one of the pillars of AEW, one of the most popular, one of the most over superstars, and frankly, one of my favorite superstars currently in All Elite Wrestling. He's a man that has stood by Sting's side throughout the years. He's been mentored by Sting. They've tag teamed so many times. All in Wembley being the most recent one, I believe. But of course, I'm talking about Darby Allin. And the reason I'm going to, again, they've been tag team partners. They've been side by side for years. That's the main reason why I firmly believe Darby Allin should and will be Sting's final opponent when Revolution comes to pass next year. And frankly, if Darby Allin gets that accolade, if he gets that accomplishment of being the final opponent in Sting's career, beating Sting in his final match, retiring the icon Sting, that I firmly believe is kind of equal to him finally winning the World Championship in AEW. Not exactly, of course. I'm not trying to compare apples to oranges here, but it would put him over the edge. It would put him on a different level in terms of how the fans view him. And I don't think I wouldn't think it would backfire on AEW as far as the fans turning on Darby Allin, as long as Sting is able to, put into words as to why he wants Darby Allin to be his final opponent. So that could definitely work. I think that's the most obvious answer, and I think that's the answer that most of you were expecting, and I'm firmly expecting that match to take place at Revolution next year. And it's a match we haven't seen yet. They've been tag team partners. They've been side by side on AEW TV for so long. They've never faced off each other in a singles match. So you got that very obvious option. And then you got option number 2, which is the not so attractive one, which is for Sting to face off against one of his former rivals that he's faced countless times in WCW and TNA in the past. And of course, I'm not going to mention just one superstar because there's many former rivals that he's had currently on the AEW roster. You got Jeff Hardy, you got Jeff Jarrett, you got Christian Cage. And out of those 3, I would pick Christian Cage because he's been doing an amazing job in his current heel role. But having either of those 3 men or anybody else of his former rivals on the current roster retire Sting would do absolutely nothing for the product. It would do absolutely nothing for the future of AEW, in my opinion. But again, if Sting has to pick his last opponent, Tony Khan is going to give him that choice. And if Sting chooses to have one of these men, whoever it may be his final opponent, then there's no other choice. There's no other choice. I don't want another Kurt Angle situation with WWE where he had to face a very talented, very underrated superstar in Constable Baron Corbin back then. Now he's doing fantastic in NXT, but Kurt Angle wanted to face off against John Cena in his final match at WrestleMania. that wasn't able to happen, so I don't want that to happen to the Icon Sting. So that's option number 2, the less attractive one. And then you got option number 3, the dark horse one, at least from my point of view. And the only reason I've included him in this list is because, again, much like with Darby Allin, it would put him over the edge. It would put him on a different level in terms of the hierarchy in AEW, and it would give him an accomplishment and accolade that he can boast about for years and years to come. Much like Brock Lesnar beating and defeating The Undertaker at WrestleMania, ending that undefeated streak. And of course, I'm talking about the current AEW World Tag Team Champion, along with Big Bill, Ricky Starks. And if Mr. Starks, absolute Ricky Starks, can end Sting's career once and for all, he could talk about that for 5, 10, 15 years to come. As long as AEW re-signs him, of course, and builds around him, which they actually should. But I don't see Ricky Starks ending MJF's title reign anytime soon. I don't see Darby Allin doing that anytime soon. So a very similar accolade, a very similar accomplishment to that, to a world title championship win, would be to end and defeat Sting in his final match. And of course, I'm not being facetious here in terms of wanting Sting to, excuse me, in terms of wanting Sting to retire. Again, he's firmly well past his prime. I went back and watched a few of his matches during his WCW career. Not so many. I haven't had too much time. I started watching him in TNA Wrestling back in 2009. Again, to me, he was the Undertaker of TNA Wrestling back then. So, yeah, Sting ending his career, it had to happen one day, and it's going to happen very, very soon. So at this point, we just have to accept it and hope for the best. Hope they pick the best feud, the best rivalry, the best opponent for his final match, and see what goes down. And also, I wanted to predict this 5-6 months in advance, so that way I don't wait until January, which is very close to the actual Revolution pay-per-view, which again makes it a little bit more obvious of who his opponent might be. So with that said, those are my 3 options. Again, Darby Allin, the most obvious one. Former rivals in Jarrett, Hardy, Christian Cage. Somebody else wouldn't be the most attractive one. And then you got the dark horse of Ricky Starks, simply because that could put him on a different level on AEW's totem pole. So with that said, leave your thoughts, comments, and predictions. Who do you think is going to be Sting's final opponent? Who do you think it should be? Leave it in the comment section below. As far as tonight goes, tune in later on tonight to the USA Network for another episode of NXT. I'm Alexis Carrillo. This has been Wrestling Talk, and I'll see you next time.